Hello and welcome to another edition of VAT Update from Tax Essentials for Advisors. My name is Ed Thompson. In this edition, we'll look at some HMRC news on a one-to-many campaign on VAT registration, and we'll also look at an update from HMRC around their policy on public electronic vehicle charging. In cases news, we'll look at a European case on transfers of a going concern. And our VAT tip this week looks at mitigating the impact of a late VAT registration. So HMRC has been running a one-to-many campaign targeting businesses trading over the VAT registration threshold but not currently registered for VAT. These one-to-many campaigns are essentially an approach where HMRC sends a standardised nudge letter to thousands of taxpayers informing them that the data held suggests that their tax affairs may be incorrect and that should prompt voluntary corrections. Now, the data in this case has been taken from various HMRC sources such as corporation tax and self-assessment returns. And I think it's fair to say that there are limitations to this process, which can mean that some taxpayers who don't have a liability to register for VAT are being worried unnecessarily. For example, we've had reports of wholly exempt businesses and businesses who've been granted exemption from registration being contacted and asked to consider if they need to register for VAT. So if traders are receiving these letters, it's worth thinking carefully about the liability of their income streams. Now, you may remember from a recent update that there was this first tier tribunal case in Charge My Street Limited, which held that, in principle at least, that public electric vehicle charging could be subject to the reduced rate of VAT of 5%. HMRC's now released a business brief which confirms its intention to appeal that decision. And in that brief, HMRC states that its policy remains that electric vehicle charging from these public charging points remains standard rated. Now, many businesses affected by this will still be considering and submitting protective claims for VAT overdeclared. However, what this does show is that HMRC is not backing down, and it's not the end of the litigation story on this. Now, I don't usually cover European cases in these updates, but it's been uncharacteristically quiet for the last couple of weeks in the VAT cases world, in the UK at least. And this is an interesting case that caught my eye and has a clear read through for us in the UK as well. It's all about transfer of going concerns, or TOGCs. That's the situation where you sell all or part of a business as a going concern and it meets certain conditions, so the transfer itself is regarded as outside the scope of VAT. In this case, we had a garden centre business, and the whole business was transferred from Company A to Company B, with the exception of some property which was kept in Company A but then was rented to Company B. Because those rents were VAT exempt, Company A had to make some big and rather unfavourable adjustments under the capital goods scheme in respect of construction costs and refurbishment costs of the building in previous years. The fact that the building was being let to the beneficiary of one of these outside the scope TOGCs wasn't enough to save the company. What this case is a reminder of the dangers of not considering VAT and the capital goods scheme when you're dealing with land and buildings, which is one of those areas that constantly trips business up. It's also a cautionary tale for anyone thinking about keeping an interest in property when the remainder of the business is transferred as a going concern. The VAT position needs to be considered really carefully. Our VAT tip today is about managing the effects of a late VAT registration. Now, it's not an uncommon situation to find a business being late to register for VAT, sometimes very late. And this can cause real headaches, not least because there can be a backdated requirement to account for output VAT on sales since the date that the registration threshold was breached. To manage the impact of this, it's worth being proactive and contacting business customers to see if they would accept and pay VAT-only invoices. Fully taxable businesses are often amenable to this, as they can typically recover all of the VAT that's passed on to them. Realistically, there will be some instances where the VAT can't be passed on to a customer, and the late registering business is going to have to fund the VAT underdeclared itself. In those circumstances, pay really close attention to how the underdeclared VAT has been calculated, especially if it's been calculated by HMRC. If you're not going to receive any additional funds from your customer, then the amount received should be treated as VAT inclusive rather than VAT exclusive. And the difference between treating the turnover as VAT inclusive or exclusive can be very meaningful to the overall VAT exposure, especially when penalties and interests are potentially applied on top of this. That's everything for this edition. I look forward to presenting another edition in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks, Ed, and I'm pleased to announce that registration is now open for the webinar you are joining us for next month. Just visit the link shown here to sign up.